Hero Podcast. Igniting both the art and the science of functional medicine. Here's your host, Dr. Brad Watts.
Sir, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining the Nutrition Hero Podcast and for bringing your message to the audience. So thank you for being here, sir.
You got it. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So I'm quite interested in the conversation we're about to have today. I've been doing a little reading and a little follow-up, and one of the things that you are way into is weight loss, specifically with patients that have chronic disease and kind of this obesity epidemic thing that's ravaging the United States right now. How did you get there, and why weight loss?
Got it. So first of all, I'd rather like to think I'm more into fat loss and health restoration than weight loss, and it's a really funny thing, and a lot of people have a lot of trouble with this distinction, but weight is simply a measure of gravity. It's a measure of the gravitational force against the earth. In other words, who cares? It says nothing about health. It says nothing about body composition. How much of a person is made of fat as compared to muscle? So every linebacker in the NFL, by the way, I'm not seeing you, Doc. Okay, good. I got your back. So every linebacker in the NFL is considered overweight based on the charts, right?
Right.
They're obviously very healthy, but muscle weighs a lot more than fat. So I just wanted to make that distinction because that should always be the goal.
That's right.
And if a person loses weight by losing water, by losing muscle, by losing a limb or an organ,
Right.
that's not the goal. That makes them less healthy in the long term.
Right.
Regarding me personally, I mean, my journey begins with, having the issue. I was up and down in weight most of my life. When I was 27 years old, I started becoming what most people would consider a health fanatic. I became vegan. I was running. I was lifting weights. I was meditating. I lost a lot of weight, and I decided, you know what, health is really what I want to do for my life. So that's when I decided to go to chiropractic school. Now, interestingly enough, while in chiropractic school, I had a tough breakup. I had a lot of stress from studying, and I ended up gaining an awful lot of weight.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You can't relate to that at all.
Yeah, all right.
Right. So it's just one of those ironies in life, right? You go to school to become a health professional, and you become less healthy because you think you're somehow immune from that because, of course, you're becoming a health professional. So I got way out of control. I ended up gaining on the order of 100 pounds. I graduated school. At that point, I was in practice. I weighed about 320 pounds, not in good shape at all. And I was fortunate enough to find this amazing weight loss protocol that I now deliver to my clients, but not before I had a major scare. Are you a baseball fan, Dr. Watts?
Yeah,
Who
absolutely.
do you root for?
I'm a Twins fan, man.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but obviously I'm a Yankee fan. Right?
Yeah.
And so, and we know that God is a Yankee fan. God himself is a Yankee fan. So,
Which God? That's all I have to say.
all of them, whichever one you can name, all of them. Let's not get into that subject. But so in 2009, I believe was the last time the Yankees won the World Series. And that night I ate and I drank quite a bit in celebration. And I went to sleep. And during the middle of the night, I had a dream that I was drowning. And I woke up and I couldn't breathe. I was hyperventilating, trying to catch my breath. And my heart was really pounding out of my chest. It was the closest that I've ever felt like maybe I'm not going to make it here. I remember I went into work later that day. I still had palpitations. And one of the other doctors said to me, he's like, man, you got to take care of this. And I tried. I mean, I did a lot of things. I hired a personal trainer at that point, and it didn't work. And I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I got injured, and I did CrossFit, and I got injured, and I did Weight Watchers, and that didn't work. And then I was at a seminar, and I heard about this fantastic protocol, and I was able to lose 100 pounds, and the rest is history.
100 pounds.
100 pounds. Yes, sir.
That is amazing.
Thank you.
That's like losing a family member.
That's well, and sometimes we want to, right? But
Yeah.
it's even better than
Wow.
losing a family member. Yeah,
Yeah.
and nothing is worse when you're lean, right? The only scenario where it's better to have all that extra heft is if you happen to get shot.
Right.
That aside, everything is better when you're lean.
Yeah. So as you're going through this protocol, what was your experience like? Were you having like any emotional breakthroughs along with it, or is it strictly chemical for you?
That's a really interesting question. I have to think about it. I mean, one of the nice things about the protocol that I deliver is that it's so structured and it's so easy that all of the drama is pretty much sucked out of it. You know, all of the what do I do now mystery and will it work and will it not work? I mean, that all just goes away. You follow the plan. Here's how I like to describe it. For those people who are Game of Thrones fans, in Game of Thrones, there was this mountain, essentially, I think it was 700 feet high and covered with ice. Well, losing weight is like trying to climb up an ice-covered mountain like that, a sheer face. And inevitably, people fall down and hurt themselves. And after doing that several times, people want to give up. The protocol that I deliver is so easy. It basically takes that mountain and it lays it down and it makes it into a path. And then my job is to be their Sherpa, to help them walk that path. So I think that's really key, that structure, that ease of execution, that knowingness that you are, in fact, if you put one foot ahead of the other, you are, in fact, going to achieve the results.
So what are some of the principles that you utilize? Like, what are some of the mechanisms that you're working with? I know there are so many different ways that a natural-minded doctor can support their patients for weight loss. Sometimes people get into the weeds with, the carbohydrate stuff, and sometimes they get into the weeds with you're only allowed to eat raw chicken and carrots, right? But like, what's your style? What are some of the principles?
Yeah, it's a great question. People get so confused and so overwhelmed, right? You mentioned the weeds, and there's so much data out there, and there's so many different stories and different ways to go about it, right? We believe really strongly that we have to create healthier machines. There are a lot of desperate ways that people try to lose weight that ultimately don't create better health. They kind of fool the body. Right. I mean, you could obviously decrease calories a great deal and temporarily, good idea, and it'll work. It doesn't necessarily create a better machine.
You can't live that way forever.
You can't live that way. It's not sustainable. I mean, there are drugs that people take to speed up the metabolism. There are surgeries to bypass, the digestive tract, and none of these things create health from the foundational level. What most lay people don't realize is that there are imbalances that take place in the body that slow down the machine and that take a person from potentially burning fat as fuel to conserving fat. And we want to make that machine better. Now, let me give you some examples. In the presence of toxins in the body is really smart and wants to protect those toxins. It wants to protect us from them. It doesn't want them in our bloodstream. So what does it do? Well, it walls off the toxins in fat. So in the presence of toxins, we're actually incentivized to hold on to fat. So we want to detox the body. We want to get rid of those toxins. And now there's a reason to get rid of the fat.
Gotcha.
Another example is hydration. More people than not are underhydrated or dehydrated out there. And very simply, it's like if you want to build a house, you need plumbing. You need to have that water. The guy in the desert crawling around, he does not have a great metabolism, nor should he. Our cells, we're made of a couple of trillion cells. They're supposed to look like grapes. They're all little factories. They need water to work right. If they're working right, then we can burn fat as fuel. If they're not working right, then we can't. pH. pH has to do with oxygen in the body. You can't burn without oxygen. So we want to rehabilitate pH in the body. So these are things that I don't even want a layperson to know too much about. But I want to get that understanding, that conceptualization that the body is a machine. Sometimes the machine is not working right. And any true health protocol is going to increase the functionality of that machine, as well as provide the body with the right food.
So what are some of the ways that you would propose to improve things like pH or improve things like toxin clearance? We've talked at great length on the podcast with people that have all sorts of ideas around detoxification, and they have all sorts of ideas around what they think is the best way to do it. And one of the things that I've found is that everybody's got a little different flavor. Everybody's got a little different spin. But what they're actually doing is they're harnessing that innate intelligence in the body that wants improvement, right? And they're forcing it to do something that it's not going to do on its own. And there are a lot of different styles to that. What would you say is your style? Are you using things like pectins and, as herbs, or what's the way that you would recommend doing that?
Well, there's, the approach that we use involves, first of all, it's first of all food, and then it's other food substances. Regarding food, obviously, if we're ingesting too much at any one time, we can't have that kind of load on our cells and still hope to be able to detoxify. So temporarily, we are going to drastically decrease calories. We need to free the system up, and we need to let the body do what it does. Mm-hmm. We also want to convert the body from a sugar metabolism to a fat metabolism. And when we do this as part of the process, there's something that takes place called autophagy. Mm-hmm. Now, autophagy, auto meaning self, and phage having to do with eating. I mean, it basically, it's where the cells cleanse themselves by eating the bad organelles. Supplements are necessary when we're talking about this. We don't have the nutrients anymore. We don't have the internal energy in our cells anymore. We don't have and I don't want to get into this, the electrical potential. I don't want to get too much into that. But again, let's talk about foundational understanding is that it's absolutely vital to be able to cleanse the body. I live in New Jersey. If I go outside, I'm inundated with chemicals.
Right.
We have to have some process by getting rid of it. And of course, the body does naturally. But if things get too out of balance, that's when it needs help. And frankly, New Jersey, it needs help. I can't speak for Minnesota.
Well, that's your trade-off for winning so many championships for the Yankees here. So
I guess anytime there's a benefit, there has to be some kind of penalty.
That's right.
So I'm willing to bear that burden, and I will happily do so again after this October when the Yankees win number 28. I know everyone hates me in the country. Thank you very much.
So when you're looking at autophagy, how long are you looking to harness autophagy? Is it a place that a patient just like resides, or is it a thing that you flip on and off selectively?
Yeah, there's in our system, in our protocol, there's a more intense phase of it. Because the body needs to rest also. So this state of autophagy and this advanced metabolic state we're able to get a person into, it does take energy. Now, this brings us into a whole other subject. And now we're also starting to get into the subject of stress, right? Because unfortunately, we are so inundated with stress, be it of the physical variety, the chemical variety, the emotional variety, that it gets into our bodies. It depletes our adrenals, so our adrenals are tired, and then we have just less energy. So that's where you get into things where you want to increase energy at the cellular level. I personally, don't think it's appropriate to detox in that intense kind of way for too long. The body has to rest, it has to rejuvenate. It's also how we're designed.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about autophagy, especially where you're saying being selective with it, turning it on and turning it off, is that it gives the body an opportunity to basically vacuum up inflammation so that we can create space for metabolism once again. So that you're allowing those engine structures of the body, those mitochondria, to do what they're designed to do. And I think that's a really powerful thing, to be able to be selective and to say, like, there's a time for this. More is not more, right? More is not better, so to speak. I think that's a good strategy there. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're out there thinking, well, I like to do weight loss with my patients and I just put the pedal to the metal. There's a time and place for that. But also I think you have to listen to what the doc's saying here and be selective, be intelligent about what you're doing with your patients so that they're not just auto-metabolizing their bodies forever.
Yeah, it's about appropriateness. And in this country, the way we learn things, or maybe it's the way we interpret things, right? It's about, often more is better. If we want to get hydrated, well, more water. No, an appropriate amount of water. The plant dies if you put too much water into it. Right. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing in the body. We can dilute some of the good things. And in the body, what happens if we drink too much water, for example, right? This is just an example, is that we'll either pee it out or it gets into the spaces in between the cells and it becomes edema, which is not helping anybody in their lives, right? So as you're saying, more is not always better. It's about balance. It's about appropriateness. And that's, I think, often what's missing in the understanding of lay people in this country.
So what about pH? Where does that come into play with your process?
pH is a whole long subject, as you know, right? I mean, there's blood pH and there's urine pH, and again, you can really over-intellectualize it and overanalyze it. We use a really interesting supplement that involves molecular hydrogen, and it's very good. It's very good for pH. But just so people understand, again, bottom line about pH is it has to do with oxygen in the body. It's absolutely necessary. We want to do that. There are various imbalances that happen in the body which will affect that. There's an understanding also that if you're not in the correct pH range, certain diseases can take hold. So we do want to affect that. And for the most part, natural foods, help out with pH. When we eat things that are unnatural, it'll obviously take the pH in a bad direction. So our foods have to be spot on. We can't do better than God/nature when it comes to eating. And so we want to eat those good, whole, natural foods. So that has to be part of any health program, of any detox program. We have to eat whole foods.
Absolutely. And one of the things that goes along with pH that drives me crazy in the consumer world is everybody says, oh, you're acidic. And pH is relative because your blood, you can't live if your blood is actually acidic. If it's actually below 7, right, you're not living very long like that. But relative acidity versus relative alkalinity, like I get where we're coming from there. And one of the things that you mentioned is with the whole foods, the value that's there that you're talking about is eating the stuff that your body's made out of. It's still made out of the same carbohydrate, like the same carbon, hydrogen, and the same oxygen. Your body is made out of that stuff. So when you replenish it, it gives you an opportunity at vitality where, better living through chemistry isn't always the name of the game. So I think that's cool.
It's never the name of the game. The guy who's taking the most medication doesn't win. And here we get into understanding. And I really think if we're going to change the health of this country, it's got to start out with definitions. Because, the powers that be, the people who are making and selling some of these medicines, what they've done is they've co-opted the very definitions and the very understanding about what it means to be healthy. How many times do people come to you, and they'll say, well, I'm completely healthy. And you'll see, that they're on 6 medications.
Right.
Right. So they don't have a problem with blood pressure because they're on a blood pressure medication. And it's just it's really a shame, because this is what happens. I don't remember the exact quote, but in war, this is what people do. They actually change definitions of things. They co-opt language and they co-opt understanding. And we have to get back to an understanding of, bottom line, what is health? Health is when the body is functioning correctly. Health is not when we need to take drugs. That's actually proof that we're not healthy. That's an indication of ill health, as opposed to, it means that we are healthy because our blood work is in these certain parameters.
That's awesome. I think you're dead on with that, man. I think you're dead on.
You get me on a soapbox here.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go there.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'll do it if I have to.
That's what this is for.
Okay, good.
So when you look at moving a patient from point A to point B, how long do you typically have patients on a weight loss protocol?
We do it in rounds, right?
Okay.
So we do it in rounds, and we have different phases within rounds.
Okay.
So typically the detox phase, at least the intense detox portion of it, will be 6 weeks. And then we want them to rest and rejuvenate for several weeks beyond that before we'll even consider going back to another round. And it's a funny thing, because we will get people that, they're losing so much weight, they feel so fantastic, and they want to keep going. They love the momentum. They hate that we take them out of it. And they want to get right back on. And we're like, no, sorry. I mean, you need to wait. And it's been to the point with a couple of people where I've almost had them sign waivers, because sometimes a person will refuse to do that.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So 6 weeks or so plus some recovery time. The average patient that you have, how many rounds of that 6 to 8 week period do they go through?
I can't say the average patient. I mean, is there any such thing as an average patient? Here's what I can tell you is we just had a couple of studies done of our protocol. One of them was a double-blind kind of controlled study, and the other was a longitudinal study
Sure.
with thousands of people. In the longitudinal study, overall, in a 6 week detox phase, people lost about 26 pounds.
Holy Moses.
That was the average in 40 days.
What?
Yes. Men lose more, always. People who are heavier lose more than people who are lighter. People who are younger lose more than people who are older. So that's an overall average. So depending on how much a person has to lose, then that'll dictate how many phases.
Wow.
So myself, yes, I did 3 rounds, essentially, to lose 100 pounds.
Which does not seem terrible at all, just so you know. 3 rounds to net you. And I would imagine you're pretty tall if you could be 320
I'm
pounds.
about 6'3".
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that does not seem unreasonable at all. Wow.
No, had I done it back to back, it would have been about 6 months. Now, the interesting thing is this, the first round I did, I lost in the low 30s, I think 32, 33 pounds. And frankly, I was pretty consistent, which is a little bit unusual, but hey, guilty as charged. But I was thrilled by that. But people who know this program, they said, that's all you lost? They were expecting me to lose, much more than that, given my size. Now, it's a very interesting phenomenon, because now we get into the role of expectations. Because had you told me 6 weeks prior I was going to lose 33 pounds, I would have been thrilled. And now, when people were saying, that's all? Now I was like a little disappointed.
Right.
I think I know in retrospect, why I quote unquote only lost 33 pounds. One of the reasons is I didn't have myself as a coach. or actually I only had myself as a coach. I didn't have someone else. So that kind of support is also really vital. And I would say that's true for most programs. You can't do anything individually as well as you can do it if you're part of a team. And so that kind of support is super important as well.
That's cool. With your program right now, how, if you put it through not the longitudinal study, but the double-blind study, what does that look like as far as percentage of people that get results?
It's the percentage of people who are compliant.
Well, 100%.
That's
100%.
really what we're talking about. And now we're getting into the human condition, because this is a whole other ballgame. It is. I mean, have you ever heard the expression, a mind is a terrible thing to have? People, human beings, God bless us, right? We will find ways to sabotage that are unbelievable. Here's what I typically see. So this is a pretty typical thing. A person will consider doing something that's in their best interest for their health. They'll have a realization that they need to, quote unquote, do something. And now they start thinking about it. And what they're thinking about is they're thinking about the efforts it's going to take, right? What they're going to have to expend. They're going to have to expend energy. They're going to have to expend time. They're going to have to change certain things, right? And they're going to have to expend some of the most valuable capital possible. And by that, I'm not even talking about money. I'm talking about hope. So now they project into the future and they say, I'm going to be expending all of these things that they assume are actually in limited supply, right? And really effort, energy, and time and all of these things are in great supply, but they assume that they're limited and there's only so much. And then they say, well, what happens if I expend all this and yet I don't get the result? Now where am I? And they will actually not start based on those computations that are going on purely in their head. They don't necessarily exist in the real world. And I think it's just so tragic. It's cliche to say that really the biggest way to lose is to never even try. It's cliche, but it's really true. But it shows you how fragile we can be sometimes. And the people who win are the animals, are the beasts, are the ones that say, you know what, I'd rather die in the process. Not that it's necessary, but you don't know that going into it.
That's right.
So that willingness and that courage, those are the people who win, probably in life, certainly in the realm of weight loss.
That's right. That mentality is the athlete mentality. I won't say who it was, but there's an athlete that says, why am I a champion? Why am I the one that is so successful? And he's on a treadmill and he said, because if you and I were racing on this treadmill right now, I would rather die on this treadmill than lose to you. And you can't do that. Yeah. You can't go there.
Right.
And that's interesting dichotomy of like human effort versus desire. I think what you're talking about there is the root of most chronic disease in the United States. It's the root of it, because we're moving into an era right now where chronic disease is going to be a choice. Imagine that. It's going to be a choice. I don't think we're completely there yet, but we're headed there. A choice. That is going to be stunning. Stunning.
That's really, really well put. We have more control than we think. It is in the best interests of certain people to let us think that we don't have control of our health. And we do, and we always have. Now, why do they do that? Well, obviously, if we're not, some outside force needs to be. And it's them. And this is how they sell things. And this is why, medicine in this country is a $2.3 trillion industry.
Right.
And we really have to take back control, but there has to be a willingness. There has to be enough courage to move beyond that fear. You were talking about athletes. Michael Jordan, if you're going to talk athletes and if you're going to talk mindset, it really begins with this guy. And he did something that he was absolutely ridiculed for, which was the most courageous thing I think I've ever seen, which is in the middle of his career as the greatest basketball player ever, he decided that he wanted to go to the minor leagues and play baseball. I thought that took unbelievable courage. And that was the reason he was the best basketball player ever, because he never played to lose. He was not afraid to be embarrassed. He was not afraid to be ashamed. He was going to give it his all and, come what may. And he won more often than not.
Absolutely. So, Doc, as we wrap up here, where can we find you and find out more information about the programming you're talking about?
You can find me all over. I'm ubiquitous. I'm everywhere. No. So the name of my company is FinTech Weight Loss. So
FinTech
obviously,
weight loss.
Googling FinTech Weight Loss, you can find me. My website is fintech-weightloss.com. I have a Facebook, FinTech Weight Loss. I can be found there.
Right.
I'm in New Jersey. I have 2 offices in New Jersey, but we do remote programs all over the country. My own mother, who lives in Las Vegas, lost 100 pounds. I didn't tell you this.
Wow.
For a big guy like me, losing 100 pounds is no big deal. For a 5'1", 73-year-old woman,
Wow.
that's a pretty big deal. And she did it from Las Vegas. She never came into the office.
Wow. That's awesome. I'll include the links in the podcast notes below this episode. But Doctor, I appreciate your time today. You're an interesting guy, and you're a good podcast guest. So keep up the good work.
Hey, thanks.